Hi and welcome to today's video. I am sitting outside on the balcony and unfortunately it's a little bit noisy here. There's kids playing in the kindergarten right under our balcony. There's some garden work or whatever it is going on. But this needs to be done and my hair is an absolute mess. Of course, as it usually is. Today I am going to go through all the books that I read in April. I know I'm a bit late to the party, but better late than never. My first read of April I read on my Kobo, and that was Her Dark Enchantments by Rosalyn Briar, and I have a whole reading vlog and book review of this book, so I will put a link to that up here and also in my description box. I'm not going into details about this book, but I really enjoyed it, and it's a retelling of The Sleeping Beauty. You have the point of view of the Wicked Witch, which I found really interesting. I would highly recommend going back and look at my video to see my more detailed views on this book. And then early April it was Easter, which means that we had a bunch of public holidays here in Norway. I actually read some crime books, which is kind of a tradition for Norway. You read crime during Easter. I do enjoy reading crime every now and then. It's kind of fun to do this traditional Easter crime thing. I grew up with crime on TV for Easter and yeah, the whole Easter crime thing. And the first crime novel that I read was this book, Den stille uke, or The Quiet Week by Sven Petter Næss. This is kind of set in an imaginary town in Norway, and it's in the area of Hedmark, or Innlandet, which is the county is called now. It's kind of two counties that has been merged together as one, but this is like in former Hedmark, which is the county where I grew up. I thought it was quite interesting to read about like all these places that I know, and then in addition to that you have this imaginary town. The main character in this book is Hardingir Singh, and he actually grew up in this town, this imaginary town, and he doesn't really remember it very fondly, to be honest. He had a bit of a rough upbringing because he was a brown person, a person of color. That of course had quite a few challenges for him growing up, being the only person or kid of color in this town. He therefore kind of knows the people in this town, and then there's this murder and he's sent there to investigate as a detective for the what is called Kripos in Norway. I think it's kind of a Scotland Yard in the UK maybe. He goes there and starts to investigate, and of course it's not very popular with the rich family because they're very affected by this. It has some twists and turns, and I really enjoyed it. It was a quite intriguing and exciting book. And the next two crime books I read were both Icelandic authors, because this first author was Norwegian. The first Icelandic author that I read for Easter, I really enjoy Icelandic crime, and it was Mørke, or The Darkness by Ragnar Jonasson. I actually think it has been translated into English, but I can't remember what the English title is. It might be The Darkness, but it also might be something else. This is the first book in a series by this author, and I have read the second book on this series previously, but this book is set after the first book in time, which I found really interesting. After reading this, I actually went to the library, well, after I got back to work after Easter break, I went and had a look for this third book in the series because I was very curious at how that would turn out. But of course it was out, so I couldn't borrow it. But I will probably pick it up at some point in time because I really want to see how things unfold. This has a lot of the atmospheric Icelandic thing that I often find in Icelandic crime, and I really enjoy this. In this book you meet Hulda Hermansdottir. She has been forced to retire early, and she's not happy about this. To kind of be kind, or kind of just like get her off his back, her boss tells her that she can pick up any case and investigate as like a last case. And then of course she starts to dig, and this is a former case that has been set as solved, but turns out that she doesn't really think that this case had been investigated as well as it should have been. So she starts to dig, and this is not very popular with anyone, to be honest. But it's kind of it's interesting, and to be honest, I'm not going to tell you more about the ending than I did not see that coming. Absolutely did not see that coming. So that was really interesting, and that's one of the reasons I really want to read the third book in the series. I also read this book by one of my favorite authors among the Icelandic crime authors, and that is Gulgin by Yrsa Sigurðardóttir. I really enjoy her books. They often have an element of supernatural stuff, but not this one, as far as I can remember. But it does have a few twists and turns that I didn't expect, and that is quite fun. It kind of starts with they finding this investor. He's dead, and it kind of looks like a suicide, or they say it's a suicide, but it doesn't take too long before they kind of figure out that no, it wasn't, because there are elements there that it couldn't have been. It also kind of happens at the same time as a diplomatic visit from, I don't remember where, it was Japan or China or somewhere. It's not like super important, but it kind of messed things up a little bit for the investigation. You have the child psychologist Freya, who has to take care of this little boy that is found in the flat of this investor, and this little boy doesn't know who the investor is. He doesn't really know a lot of things, which is making things really difficult. And then there is Hulda, who needs to kind of sort this case out. And I thought it was kind of funny when they kind of had to drive around Reykjavik to try to find the home of the little boy, and of course it was didn't quite turn out as they had hoped, but it did kind of help this case at the same time. But yeah, it was an interesting read. I enjoyed it. It's not a lot to say about this book without spoiling it. I don't even know which number in the series this is. It's not important. You can read it as a standalone, which is good. Then I read a book that has been standing on my shelf for years. I think I bought it like early 2000s, so it was in high time to read it. This is another book of my project of reading the books on my shelf. In this book you actually have this talking cat, which I just loved. It's not a spoiler because it's revealed in the very beginning of the book. The main character in this book is what's called a keeper. She's a member of a group, selected group with abilities, so they kind of keep the universe kept together in one piece, sort of, and there's a lot of supernatural stuff. They're fighting evil. It was just like a fun read. It's not like deep or anything. She's kind of thrown into to this like old hotel and has to take care of the hotel because the person who ran it previously just kind of buggered off when she showed up, and I think he was a keeper as well, and he was just tired of keeping this hellhole kind of thing. So yeah, a fun read. I started reading the septology a little while back, and I really enjoyed the first book. I finally got around to reading the second book in the series. It's kind of 3 books, but it's not really a trilogy, and it all kind of blends in together. Jeg en annan is the Norwegian nynorsk title of it, and it has been translated into English, and it's called I is Another, which I find a little bit odd, but I'm not the translator. I just really enjoy reading these books. It kind of looks a bit intimidating when you first look at it because there's no punctuations. But when you start reading it, at least for me, I started reading it and I just went into a sort of a rhythm and a flow. So even though there's like no actual punctuations, you kind of realize where you're supposed to kind of stop and have a breath. And the main thing about these books for me, I think, is the language. There's some plot, but it's not like a super complicated plot. It's kind of a life story in a way. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I am hoping to read the third and last book in this series at some point as well. Lena fra Tysfjord, or Lena from Tysfjord, is a book I read for the Book Crossing 24-hour readathon 2023, and I have a whole video vlog on that where I talk more about this book, and I will link to that up here as well as in the description box. This was a very interesting read. It's basically the story of Lena and her life, and we kind of meet, or she's mentioned in another non-fiction book called The Dark Secrets of Tysfjord, and I read that a couple of years ago, I think. I thought it was a very hard read. Comes with a lot of trigger warnings. This also should come with a trigger warning because it talks about her life, and it has been a very rough life. But it's also about the indigenous people in Norway and how we have, as Norwegians, have treated them very poorly during the history of time. And it's not that long ago either, which is kind of sad. But I am hoping that things will get better, and has gotten better. But a very important read, I think, and I hope more people will read it. My last read of April was also for the readathon, or I started it during the readathon and then I read the rest of it after the readathon, because it's a brick of a book. It has, let me see, 546 pages, so quite a few. I am very surprised it didn't take me longer to read it because it's so thick, but I did really enjoy it. And it is a book that I have seen around booktube, around TikTok, around Bookstagram. It's all over the place, and I think it's also a dark academia book, and it's Babel by R.F. Kuang. There are so many things I actually really enjoyed about this. We meet this young Chinese boy who has grown up in China with his mom and a sort of a servant and governess, so he's been taught a lot, and he also speaks English with his governess. He's kind of native in English in many ways, as well as Cantonese, which is his native language, and that will play a very important role in the story of this young boy. And then one day his mom and himself gets very sick, very ill, and then there's this Englishman who comes and gives him something that makes him survive, but his mom's pass away, and this Englishman takes him back to London first and then teaches him a lot of stuff and then sends him off to Oxford, because this Englishman is a professor at the University of Oxford, and then he is sent to Oxford University to become an interpreter and translator. And that is kind of the base of the backstory, and then there's a lot of other stuff about his friendships, and there's also a lot about racism and colonialism in this book, and I just found it to be really, really, really good. I also hope to read other books by the author. I just really enjoyed it. So the screaming here has now become pretty unbearable, so I'm going to finish this up. There's also so much noise. I'm so tired of this noise. Anyway, remember to give the video a like, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so you don't miss out of any content that I upload. Also leave a comment and tell me about the books that you read in April. Did you have any really good reads? Maybe? I guess that's it for now, and I will see you in my next. Bye.